Chapter 1. The Birth of a Gunrunner. Yuri Orlov was born in the bustling streets of Little Odessa, a Ukrainian immigrant enclave in Brooklyn, New York. As a child, Yuri was surrounded by the hustle of survival, witnessing the tough life his parents endured. But despite the challenges, he grew up with dreams of something bigger, far removed from his family's restaurant business. Little did he know that his destiny would be tied to the weapons that would shape the conflicts of the world. Yuri's first encounter with guns came during a local mafia hit, a brutal reality of the neighborhood. Seeing the efficiency of the murder, Yuri realized that guns represented not just death, but power and money. He knew he didn't want to just survive like his parents. He wanted wealth, control, and a life that transcended the mundane struggles of his upbringing. This was the moment that set Yuri on his path to becoming an international arms dealer. Alongside his younger brother, Vitaly, Yuri embarked on a journey that would take him to the darkest corners of the world. It wasn't just a career choice, it was an obsession, and he was determined to succeed. Chapter 2. The Rise of the Arms Trade. Yuri's first foray into the world of arms dealing started small. He learned quickly, forging contacts with small-time gunrunners and mafia members. But Yuri had bigger ambitions. The collapse of the Soviet Union in the late 1980s provided him with the perfect opportunity. With the vast Soviet military arsenal up for grabs, Yuri was in a position to exploit the chaos. He traveled to Ukraine, where he met with corrupt officials willing to sell military-grade weapons at rock-bottom prices. Tanks, helicopters, and even fighter jets were available for the right price. Yuri established connections that allowed him to buy these weapons and smuggle them to conflict zones around the world. He sold to anyone who could pay warlords, dictators, and militias. Morality to Yuri was a luxury he couldn't afford. Vitaly, once reluctant, soon became Yuri's trusted partner. Together, they built an empire, with Yuri as the brains and Vitaly providing the muscle. However, Vitaly's growing drug addiction became a problem, leading to reckless decisions. Despite the lucrative deals, Yuri struggled to control his brother's behavior, fearing it would jeopardize their operation. Chapter 3. The Art of Deception. As Yuri's reputation grew, so did his need to stay one step ahead of the law. Enter Jack Valentine, a determined and idealistic Interpol agent. Valentine had one mission: to take down Yuri Orlov. But Yuri was a master of deception, skilled at covering his tracks and exploiting legal loopholes. He used flags of convenience to disguise his shipments, bribed officials, and even created fake end-user certificates to make his deals look legitimate. Valentine was constantly on Yuri's trail, but could never gather enough evidence to make an arrest stick. It was a game of cat and mouse, with Yuri always managing to slip through the cracks. Despite the growing pressure, Yuri remained calm, confident in his ability to evade justice. But as much as Yuri tried to maintain control, cracks began to show. Vitaly's drug addiction worsened, and the chaos of the arms trade started to take its toll. Yuri's conscience, long suppressed, began to surface. He witnessed firsthand the devastation his weapons caused the child soldiers, the massacres, the families torn apart. Yet, he rationalized it all as the cost of doing business. Chapter 4. Love and Lies. While Yuri was building his empire, he was also constructing a facade of normalcy. He fell in love with Eva Fontaine, a beautiful supermodel, and pursued her relentlessly. He wooed her with lavish gifts, private jets, and promises of a luxurious life. Eventually, Eva fell for Yuri, unaware of his true profession. Yuri kept his arms dealing hidden from Eva, creating an image of himself as a legitimate businessman. They got married, had a son, and settled into what seemed like the perfect life. But the truth was always lurking beneath the surface. Yuri's dual life was a delicate balancing act. One misstep, and his entire world could come crashing down. Ava, despite her love for Yuri, began to suspect that something was amiss. She noticed the long trips, the mysterious phone calls, and the unexplained wealth. But Yuri was always quick with an excuse, convincing her that everything was fine. Yet the tension between his two lives continued to build, and Yuri knew that it was only a matter of time before the truth would be exposed. Chapter 5. The Consequences of War. Yuri's operations expanded to Africa, where he became the primary arms supplier for ruthless warlords. He struck a deal with Andrew Baptiste Siaster, the brutal dictator of Liberia who was engaged in a bloody civil war. Baptiste was a man who ruled through fear and violence, and Yuri supplied him with the tools he needed to maintain his grip on power. But the true horrors of the war hit close to home when Vitali, increasingly disturbed by the atrocities they were facilitating, decided to take action. In a moment of conscience, Vitali tried to sabotage a deal that would supply weapons for a massacre. Yuri, desperate to keep the deal intact and protect his brother, tried to stop him. But Vitali's determination led to tragedy. He was killed in the crossfire. Vitali's death was a turning point for Yuri. He had always prided himself on being able to separate business from emotion, but the loss of his brother shattered that illusion. Yuri was left to grapple with the reality of his actions and the blood that was now on his hands. Chapter 6. The Fall. As Yuri's empire grew, so did the attention from law enforcement. Jack Valentine intensified his pursuit, closing in on Yuri with each passing deal. Meanwhile, Ava's suspicions grew, and she eventually discovered the truth about Yuri's arms trade. Devastated by the revelation, Ava left him, taking their son with her. Yuri was now truly alone, his family gone and his brother dead. Yet, even in the face of this personal destruction, he continued to run his arms business. It was the only life he knew, and despite the cost, he refused to give it up. In the end, Valentine finally managed to arrest Yuri. But in a final twist of fate, Yuri's connections within the government saved him. A high-ranking official, needing Yuri's services to supply weapons to covert operations, arranged for his release. Despite Valentine's best efforts, Yuri walked free. Yuri's victory, however, was hollow. He had lost his family, his brother, and any semblance of a normal life. He was a man who had sold his soul to war, and though he had evaded justice, he could never escape the consequences of his choices. Yuri Orlov's story is one of moral compromise, greed, and the high cost of power. He rose from the streets of Little Odessa to become one of the most notorious arms dealers in the world, but in doing so, he lost everything that truly mattered. In the end, Yuri may have survived, but the world he helped create was one of chaos, destruction, and death. For Yuri, the price of power was steep, and while he escaped the law, he could never escape the truth.